Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Our city calls itself a town and feels like a village, at least when we meet each other halfway. And we work together to grow our harmony, our prosperity, and our safety for everyone. And today, we're joined by Gabe Charles, the Director of Planning Services for the town of Oakville, and Kirk Biggar, who's the Manager of Policy Planning and Heritage Planning Services in the town of Oakville. Guys, welcome. The question I think on everybody's mind in Oakville these days is what's going on with growth? How come we have to grow? How are we going to grow? And can we grow to continue to be as livable as possible? So let me frame the first question. We've got a housing strategy and action plan in front of council and the public. Who wants to try to explain what that's out to do? Like you can fight for the answer of this. You can fight for the right to answer this one.
I don't mind taking a stab at it, and I can certainly turn it over to Kirk to help us out. And I think you said it best before, Mayor Burton, where you said in the construct that we have in Ontario, we're never allowed to say that we're full. So we're always faced with those growth pressures where we're always in requirement to continue to grow and find ways in which to accommodate more residents throughout the municipality. And the province over the last number of years has really stressed that for us and adjusted its legislation over a number of different fronts to get us to a point where we are encouraging more of that growth. One of the ways in which we have to do that, beyond just signing on to the housing pledge that the province offered us, is to look at doing an overall housing strategy and an action plan, because one of the critical things that we've seen is the affordability on the housing side. So although the housing market and the product that keeps getting built is more or less keeping pace, it's really turning now towards the affordability of that. So our intent with our housing strategy and action plan is to find ways in which to really accommodate that growth and find ways in which to take the stressors off of the affordability aspect of it. So we had provided earlier this year a draft to council, which really is looking at 6 main goals, and from that a number of pieces, I guess, that we could say that we would be looking to really achieve those goals. So it's still in draft right now, and Kirk can probably get into a little bit more detail of that.
Well, go ahead, Kirk. And when you've given us some detail, I've got a follow-up question about this whole question of affordability.
Yeah, so maybe I mean, not a whole lot more to add about this strategy and action plan other than it's out for public engagement at the moment. We have some open houses and a survey online, and we're trying to get a better sense for how we could fine-tune that strategy to Oakville's needs. Mayor Burton, just again to pick up on a theme which I think strikes to affordability, is about supply. And really all of these initiatives, including Oakville's initiative, is focused on supply. And from that, we think that affordability will flow. There are some tools around affordability that we can use as well. But just increasing supply and accelerating supply, I think, is what we're really focused on here in Oakville.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear from the province's legislation that they've chosen to take the path that when I studied economics, it's the only path. In, you know, if you're an economist, prices go up as long as the supply is lower than the number of people that want to buy it. And only when there's more housing than people want to buy, are prices going to stop going up. And you can argue over, you know, what is affordable. And I'd actually like to digress for a second with you guys to talk about how do we decide what something is affordable? What is affordability? An economist would say, if somebody bought it, it was affordable. Like the economic evidence is, oh, somebody paid the price, they could afford it. And then by and large, we have always had people who could not afford to buy a new house. And for them, new houses, or sometimes any house, has been literally economically unaffordable. Traditionally, something like 65% of Canada owns a home and 35% rents. And that kind of speaks to the economics of this question of affordability. So even as we have to increase our housing supply because we got a lot of people coming in to keep the economy going so that our pensions will not crash, there's an effort going on, in my view, to kind of take over the supply issue and say, yes, but it's not affordable. And so we have to figure out, does every house have to be quote unquote affordable? And if every house is bought, isn't it already? And so we have this definition running around of affordability that CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, has been using for generations, that housing shouldn't cost more than about 30% of your income. And I think we've all subscribed to that. And that makes sense as long as we remember that there's lots of different levels of income in the country. When the last time we succeeded in meeting our affordability targets in Halton, I think the definition of affordability was, using that formula of 30% of income and using the average income. The affordability level was in the $400,000 to $500,000 a unit level, and I think we actually met and I think we had a target at that year, 2 years ago, I think it is, where 30% of new housing should be affordable, and that was a locally generated Halton target, not imposed on us. And I don't think last year, because of the great takeoff in prices, I don't think we're going to have met it last year. But here's the nub. If you buy a house, say you could buy a house on the ground for $500,000, but they're really worth $1.5 million. Well, you're going to you could turn around and sell it for $1 million profit, and then it's not affordable anymore. And the recipient of the affordable house is $1 million richer. That's the nub of this economic problem, which is, how do you get it to those who need it? Are you guys working on some way to, if we sell an affordable house and somebody makes an affordable house, that somehow or other it stays affordable for some length of time?
I'll jump in here. It's an interesting quandary that you paint, because the economic side of it, and I don't in any way profess to be an economics major, is so entangled, and there's so many different factors and influences on what makes something affordable. As you say, what could be affordable to one person may not be affordable to another, and that's why over the decades you've seen the as they've said, drive till you qualify, where people just keep moving farther and farther away from what might be the economic engine of an area. And that's not unique to the GTA. That happens all over the country.
I've done it in my life.
Mm-hmm. Similar. So how we define it as affordable, as you say, there's the clinical definition that you may find through CMHC, but then it's really about, how do we ensure that we have enough within that housing continuum that gives people choices that they can then choose to see what is affordable for them. Historically in Oakville, we haven't had, for example, quite as much on the apartment side, or the grade related dense type of product, townhouses or lane-based towns, where we're seeing a lot more of that. So we're increasing the supply, as Kirk was alluding to earlier, which is intended to help on that economic side. What we don't have control over are things that the taxes that go on new homes, labor, supply chain issues, all of those other things which have an effect on the affordability for someone on what a house or a home might be, regardless of the typology, whether it's a single detached house or an apartment. There's so many different things which can affect that affordability. So one of the things that we have been looking at through the housing strategy are, what are those levers that the municipality can exercise to make it or encourage some other options for affordability. So there's been discussion about using inclusionary zoning, for example. There's been look at a broader mix of housing types that would allow us to provide more of that choice throughout the community, and therefore by extension make it more affordable for others.
Now, inclusionary zoning is an amazingly interesting tool. Started out as a tool that would allow us to basically tell an applicant what percent of the housing in their proposal had to be affordable. And we were, at the time, we were able to use that CMHC definition. And as I recall, only the city of Toronto actually went and used it, and everybody else kind of said, it's a little bit of just a tricky slope because, nobody did it. We certainly didn't do it. But and I wanted to use it, but before we could, the province started restricting it to, well, you can only do it here and you can only require 10%. I think they're down to 5%. And now we can only use it in a provincially significant municipal transit area. I mean, what's the acronym?
Protected major transit station area.
Protected major transit station area.
That's an opportunity under the Planning Act, and it would apply in Oakville to Midtown Oakville or the Bronte Go area, for example.
And the ceiling on what we can require, is it 5 or 10%?
It's a 5%.
Right. So, I mean, if that doesn't prove anything else, it proves I've been paying attention for 17 years. So now but we still don't have a way that I know of to keep the unit affordable. And there are models out there. I know that Habitat for Humanity's got one where they let the homeowner that they benefit share in the appreciation of the property, but they have to pay back some. And my great frustration with all of this is that we're not the Habitat's the seller of the house to the beneficiary. We're not. We're only the planning approval giver. And so I don't know that we have the power to reach through to the developer and come up with these ideas, but presumably they're able to copy Habitat. Maybe all we can do is have you guys encourage them. Is that your sense of it?
So I'll speak to that for a moment. When we look at the continuum of housing, the town has a limited role, and really it's what Gabe was touching on earlier in terms of land use. So we're providing a greater range and mix in great locations for newcomers and for people to transition in our community. So that's how we're going to be increasing supply to address affordability. There's other ways we can also help affordability. For example, putting these new houses or homes in proximity to higher order transit. So car ownership and transit use can coexist in a different way. Also building complete communities where you don't need to drive, but you could walk or cycle to some of those other facilities. That I think really helps to assist affordability. And those are the sorts of tools that we can rely on here at the town of Oakville. Other tools available, for example, back to this securing long-term affordability, for example, that you were touching on, that again comes from government funding. And the region typically, or in this part of the world, has been able to do that and has that responsibility. And they have the funds to flow through and secure that longer-term subsidy, which then helps with affordability in that sense.
Oh yeah, social housing is a whole nother smoke that we will have to wrestle with, because even though we have this two-level government, we are the forces on the ground, and they pass stuff down to us. They don't do it.
You raised another interesting point about the opportunity for inclusionary zoning and the rules changing. In the province of Ontario, we've been seeing this back and forth between this 30% target, which is known as a means test, and then sort of market thresholds. And what is the definition of affordability in combining those or separate from each other? And I think we have another bill that's come out that we're commenting on that's actually trying to pin down an Ontario definition of affordability. So we're looking at that and providing comments to the province on that.
That's right. And viewers of this show and any citizen is welcome to comment on when the province decides that it wants input, it puts a proposed change or legislation on what's called the Environmental Registry of Ontario, the ERO, and they give you 30 days, 60 days, whatever they feel like to comment. And there's a couple of weeks left to comment on a proposed change to their current definition of affordable housing. They shifted the definition of affordable housing for the purpose of exempting affordable housing from development charges. And it's important to remember that's all that's involved here. They shifted it to a market, a portion of the, you know, a level of the market, basically a price test. And the world reacted that was crazy. It didn't sound affordable. And they now have a proposal up for comment that says, oh, okay, we'll go back to the 30% of income standard, but we'll harness it to a 60% of the market price. And on the face of it, to my eyes, that appears to be a reasonable compromise between where they went and what they're proposing. However, there's always a however with this government. We're talking about a mechanism whose only purpose is to reduce the revenue that we get to build the essential infrastructure to support the affordable housing. And that leaves us with the property tax to make up the difference. I personally do not believe that the property tax was ever intended to subsidize affordable housing. It's supposed to support services to existing housing, if I don't oversimplify too much. So my comment to the government is, and will be going in on the ERO to say, you know, this works to discourage this definition, however you do it, discourages affordable housing because it puts the price of the cuts to development charges on the property tax, and cities are, you know, all of us are going to be extremely reluctant to ask taxpayers to fund affordable housing, property taxpayers to fund affordable housing. And what do you make of that? What do you think will happen? I personally think I'll get ignored, but go ahead.
It is an absolute challenge for all the municipalities in Ontario because of the way that this is going to affect them. When we have hundreds of millions of dollars for infrastructure, and it's not just the hard infrastructure in terms of the pipes and the roads, but it's also related to our rec centers, our libraries, etc. That all of that gets affected by the changes that are made. And you're quite right. Over the years, this provincial government has nibbled away at all of those different growth funding tools that we have, whether it's DCs or parkland or what have you, which does make it challenging for us, as Kirk was saying, to really build those complete communities, to have the amount of park space that's needed to support the increase in population. How are we going to do that? Regardless of how you define affordable, there's still that constant pressure on municipal budgets. And you're quite right. It was never structured with the intent of having to deliver that really big infrastructure that, quite frankly, is better off going towards development charges.
Yeah. No, there is an alternative to development charges, and it's not the property tax. In the United States, they use bonds that are assigned to the homeowners. So you might issue a really big bond and then chop it up into little pieces and assign it to each of the homes in a new subdivision. And then the homeowner pays that off over 40 years, along with every other thing that it takes to own and operate a home. And the result of that approach is that the price of the home does not have any of the development charges in it. So, you know, we've seen estimates that $70,000, $80,000 of the price of a home comes from development charges. In Oakville, I would dispute that it's quite that high, but it is a significant amount of money. Well, imagine if that wasn't in the price of the house at all. You would have more affordable housing, and the user would be paying, and maybe user pay is the better approach. But we're a long way from in Ontario from being able to do that, because I don't think we have the legal framework that we need in Ontario to issue a bond and then assign it like that. And that system in the United States, by the way, is 123 years old. So it's not like it's a novel idea that they're testing out. But here we are. So another question that is kind of a burning question for us in the public sphere, and you can maybe help us with, is how will we know, or how do we know, the right amount of the different housing types? And let's describe them as social housing, assisted housing, affordable housing, the new catchphrase, attainable housing and market housing. And do we in fact have targets for each of those 5 categories? Or should we? Don't answer all at once.
No, I'll try the first bit there. We don't have specific targets by housing type. We're dealing really broadly with the population and employment forecast over time and how to accommodate that bulk number of people within the town of Oakville. I think and it's partly because we haven't had the tools to sort of compel the development of those various types of housing. As we are able to generate more opportunities for those types of housing, we'll be able to track them and look at those balances and see where we might be falling short and where we might be able to make up some of those differences. I'll say one area where we are quite active coming out of our action plan is rental housing protection. So we have a new bylaw. We have some new policy tools that will be coming into the official plan ultimately. And that's one form of housing that is potentially under threat from market forces or market changes. So we have some new tools there that we'll be able to implement and protect housing, rental housing, and we'll be tracking that, of course, as those units move through.
Yeah, I have to give you guys a shout out for the way you expeditiously moved my rental protection bylaw through. That was wonderful. And by the way, I have an idea to improve on it at the appropriate time, maybe in a few months. There's been progress in other jurisdictions that looks really promising that maybe we could be the first in Ontario to adopt. Now, on affordable housing quantities, we know that in those 5 types that I was describing, social, assisted, affordable, attainable, and market, we have this inclusionary zoning tool in protected major transit station areas, and it's limited to 5%. So the province has kind of given direction. Doesn't that amount to direction? 5% of your new housing in protected major transit station areas is your limit. So there's your, I mean, it's not the same thing as a quota because you don't have to do any. And any that you do, apparently you got to pay for. The province seems to be pushing, to my eye, seems to be pushing back at the cities to say, you want affordable housing, pay for it yourself. And could you dispute that, or would I get away with saying that's what they seem to be doing?
I would agree with you. I believe that seems to be the direction it's going. And the challenge that we have as a lower tier municipality is Halton Region, in our case, they're the housing provider. We don't provide the housing. We can put in place the rules, we can set the land use construct, we can do those types of things. Like that's where we're limited, but we can't deliver. We're not the ones who are hammering the nails and cutting the wood to try and build these facilities. So as a result of that, we end up being in a situation where either the region has to accelerate that, or the municipalities may be on the hook to, if you want it, you're going to have to participate more strongly.
Yeah, well, I mean, Halton Community Housing Corporation and its equivalent in the other regions and in the single tier cities like Toronto or Guelph, that's the housing service manager function here. And once upon a time, there was we're talking 60, 70 years ago, there was a gigantic debate in our province over who should be responsible for that. Well, should it be the province or should it be, who? And cities wound up with the bag on that. And, in Halton, the upper part of our city, which is called Halton, has it, and the lower part, Oakville, we don't, but we're a framework that has to work together. So, and I, as a member of both councils, actually don't get to live a schizophrenic life. I have to think about them both because I'm responsible for both of them. It's just a weird deal where you have to go to 2 different council chambers to do business. So I want to move on now to maybe the last point that we can cover today, because we've got about 2 minutes left. And that is a question that's come up a number of times in public, which is what comes first, the housing plan, as in the official plan, or the financial plan? And the answer is the housing plan, official plan always comes first, and then we do the master plans to bring that into effect, and we do the financial plan, which is how we figured out how to pay for it, using well-established revenue tools, whether it's development charges or some gap to be made up by property taxes. Is there any rationale for doing a financial plan first, or does the system that we have actually make sense?
The challenge that we have on the financial side is how do you determine what it is you can afford if you don't have the plan first of what it is you want to actually have for a community. But that said, it's not just a straight line, you do one then the other. There always has to be that feedback where you need to be able to come back on the financial side to understand what the implications are going to be, and then probably adjust your land use plan a little bit more to try to balance that out. Or conversely, you figure out what are the different tools that we're going to have to look at over that much longer term to try to achieve the vision that the community has. So I would say it's more iterative in some ways. It's not just always black and white, one and then the other.
I was going to prompt you for that magic word iterative, which basically means, well, you work back and forth until you get to the number that you want or that you can afford. So you get top marks for that answer. In the 30 seconds or so that we got left, what's our state of housing applications? Let's call it the pipeline. We've got a target to deliver permissions for 33,000 housing units over the next 8 years. Have you got that many in the pipeline already? Or, are we fat? Are we short? How are we doing?
I'll answer that for you, Mayor Burton. We have, so the province has set a target for 1.5 million homes by 2031.
You've only got 10 seconds, so you got to be quick.
Right. We have a pledge of 33,000, and we have a pipeline of close to 40,000 under review to meet that supply.
Well done. That gives us just enough time to thank everybody for watching and invite them to tune in next time when we'll bring you the real deal on housing and growth in Oakville. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.